When you hear the name Spider-Man, what comes to mind? Probably a web slinger soaring between skyscrapers, cracking jokes, and saving the city one clip at a time. He's the ultimate friendly neighborhood superhero, the good guy you can count on. But when you step back and really think about Peter Parker, you realize his story isn't squeaky clean heroism from start to finish. Peter's journey is messy, emotional, personal. It's filled with selfish choices, guilty motives, and moments where he flirts with crossing lines most heroes wouldn't dare approach. Which begs the question, is Peter Parker actually an anti-hero? Let's crack this open and see what's under the mask. First, we need to get our terms straight. An anti-hero isn't a villain. They're still the protagonist, but they don't fit the traditional heroic mold. Classic heroes, think Superman or Captain America, they're idealists. They fight for justice because it's right, full stop. Anti-heroes are messier. They have their own agendas, their own selfish reasons for stepping into the fray. They're not role models, they're relatable. Anti-heroes might be motivated by personal gain, revenge, or guilt, not pure altruism. Make morally questionable decisions to achieve their goals, cross ethical lines when it suits them, feel disconnected from society, operating more like outlaws and icons. Think Walter White cooking meth to secure his family's future, or Wolverine using his claws first and asking questions never. Anti-heroes live in the gray area, and when you look closely, so does Peter Parker, at least some of the time. Spider-Man's 1962 debut wasn't just another superhero origin story, it was a revolution. Up until then, superheroes were larger than life. They were gods, icons, and moral ideals in capes. Then came Peter Parker, a broke, bullied high school kid trying to figure out homework, hormones, and why life was so damn hard. That grounded, painfully human relatability set him apart. And that same relatability also meant Peter wasn't naturally heroic. Not at first. Most classic heroes are born with noble intentions. Clark Kent wants to save the world. Steve Rogers wants to fight bullies. Peter Parker? Peter just wants to get paid. The moment Peter gets his powers, his first move isn't saving lives. It's entering wrestling matches and chasing TV stardom. His powers are a meal ticket, not a responsibility. And when a thief runs past him, Peter shrugs it off. It's not my problem. That one selfish decision changes everything. The thief kills Uncle Ben and Peter realizes the truth. Like it or not, his power makes him responsible. That's already anti-hero energy. His sense of duty isn't born from altruism. It's born from guilt. Even after Uncle Ben's death, Peter doesn't exactly become a beacon of morality overnight. Early Spidey is hot-headed, insecure, and downright petty. When J. Jonah Jameson trashes Spider in the Daily Bugle, Peter webs him to a chair out of sheer spite. When Johnny Storm steals a little too much spotlight, Peter starts a fight just to show him up. And that's to say nothing of his relationships with his villains. Most of Spider-Man's greatest enemies aren't just bad guys. They're people Peter knows personally. Friends, mentors, father figures. It's never just about stopping a random villain. It's about fighting people that he once cared about. The emotional messiness is pure anti-hero territory, fighting not for justice, but because it's personal. If you stack up the evidence, Peter Parker has a pretty solid anti-hero resume. Selfish fame-chasing origin story. Motivation fueled by personal guilt rather than moral clarity. Petty, emotionally driven decisions, especially in his early career. A rogues gallery made up of people from his personal life. A love-hate relationship with the public, who often see him as a menace rather than a hero. Frequent moments of self-doubt, bitterness, and even quitting altogether. That's not Captain America behavior. That's messy, relatable, and a whole lot closer to the anti-hero playbook than most people realize. But here's where things get complicated. True anti-heroes, your Punishers, your Deadpools, they lean into their flaws. They don't outgrow them, they own them. But Peter doesn't do that. In fact, the entire arc of Spider-Man is about growth and redemption. Peter starts selfish, no argument there, but he spends his life trying to be better. Uncle Ben's death isn't just a tragic backstory, it's a moral awakening. From that moment on, Peter uses his powers not for profit but to protect, not because he wants to be a hero, but because he feels he has to be. That guilt evolves into empathy. The same kid who wanted to cash in his powers becomes the man who risks his life to save the same city that treats him like a villain. That's not an anti-hero. That's a flawed hero fighting to rise above his flaws. Heroism isn't a checklist, it's a spectrum. At one end, you've got characters like Captain America, unwaveringly selfish and morally unshakable. And at the other end, you've got the Punisher, willing to kill, torture, and terrorize to get the job done. Peter Parker, he's dead center. He starts closer to an anti-hero driven by selfishness and personal guilt, but with time he grows into something more. A true hero, flawed but earnest. What makes Peter special isn't that he's perfect, it's that he constantly chooses not to become the anti-hero he could so easily be. And if you really want to spice up this debate, just look at the Spider-Verse. Across dimensions, we see Peters who gave in, who killed, who quit, who embraced the darkness. The lesson? Anti-heroism is always a step away from Peter Parker. Our Peter, the one we love, chooses hope over and over again. But the fact that the darker path is always there speaks volumes about how close he lives to the edge. But the real heart of this debate comes down to why Peter fights at all. Classic heroes fight because it's right. Anti-heroes fight because they need something. Revenge, validation, atonement. For Peter, it's always been both. He saves lives because it's right, but also because he's haunted by the one life he didn't save. That internal struggle between responsibility and redemption is why Peter Parker will always feel more human than heroic icons like Superman. We live in the era of the anti-hero. Characters like Homelander, Omni-Man, and Soldier Boy dominate pop culture, feeding our appetite for morally gray icons who reflect our own cultural cynicism. But Peter Parker endures because he's something rarer, a hero who isn't perfect, but chooses to do good anyway. In a time when believing in heroes feels naive, Peter Parker's constant fight to do better, even when it hurts, feels revolutionary. So is Peter Parker an anti-hero? The answer is beautifully messy. He's both, and neither. Peter Parker starts with anti-hero tendencies, no doubt about that. He's selfish at first. He makes choices that hurt people. He lets personal pain guide his hand. He's petty, impulsive, insecure, and all of that makes him feel real. But what defines Peter isn't his mistakes. It's the fact that he never stops trying to rise above them. At the end of the day, Peter fights to be better. Not because it's easy, not because anyone's watching, and not even because he's convinced he's the best person for the job. He fights because he knows what happens when you don't. And that knowledge, that weight of personal failure is what keeps him swinging back into the fray. That fight, the constant, painful, deeply human battle between who Peter is and who he's trying to become, is why Spider-Man is so much more than a symbol. He isn't just a superhero for comic book readers. He's the hero for anyone who's ever messed up, doubted themselves, or wondered if they were good enough to make a difference. Here's proof that heroism isn't about being flawless. It's about fighting your flaws until you win more than you lose. Peter Parker isn't the perfect hero. He's the possible hero. The one who shows us that doing the right thing isn't about where you start. It's about the choices you make when no one's cheering, when your own heart's against you, and when the easy way out looks so tempting you can barely breathe. And that's why Spider-Man doesn't just belong to Marvel. He belongs to us. To every awkward kid who felt invisible, to every adult who carries regrets they can't shake, to anyone who's ever thought, it's not my problem, and then realized too late that it always was. Peter Parker's our hero because he reminds us that you don't have to be perfect to matter. You just have to keep showing up. If you've made it this far, you must really like deep dives into Spider-Man's world. If so, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. We'll see you on the next one.